Be sure to follow the channel on social media. The links are in the description below. And if you would like to support the channel, check out the Patreon page and merch store. Patreon perks include free gifts, early access, exclusive content, and even voice characters and audiobooks here on the channel, and much more. Check it out. Tonight's upload is brought to you by the patrons of this channel. That's Jeffrey Quick, Daniel Mackey, David Arnold, Alex Vanover, DK, Krista Campbell, Rob Davey, Josh Gardner, Willow Ravenwood, Lauren Vaught, Kristen K, Michael, William Schaefer, Alleyway, Liam Anderson, Allison Sibe, Bree Girl, Bonanza Jellybean, Ryan Woodward, Iron Alexa, Hawaii, Cecilia Spears, Sean Campbell, Catherine McClear, and Carl Eakins. Okay, slashaholics and Halloween fans, welcome to the 80s Slasher Library. Little quick recap on the last upload of Halloween 4. Loomis and Meeker were able to find the girls and get them off the streets before Michael could do his damage to them. We got to see all the people that were dressing up as Michael in the city. We know that there's a lynch mob out looking for Michael, so that could really go roughly. If you haven't seen the movie or the book, I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, we got to see the aftermath of Michael at the police station, and man, it was brutal in this book. We also ran back into Jack Sayer, who had his eyes gouged out, but survived the Michael Myers attack. And at this point, the sheriff, his deputy, Loomis, Rachel, Jamie, Kelly, and Brady are all at the sheriff's house, locking the house down, getting ready to face off against Michael if it happens. Unbeknownst to them, Michael hitched a ride in Logan's police car, and is at the house at this very moment. So without further ado, let's see what happens next with Halloween 4. Halloween 4, the novelization by Nicholas Grabowsky. Chapter 25. Haddonfield Park, or the Terry Grounds as it was sometimes called for a reason long forgotten by most, was the blackest part of town at night. This was due to the fact that someone had flung bricks at the two light posts situated at both ends, and since that incident a few days ago, no one had time to fix them. The darkness was interrupted by the brightness of the headlights of a pickup truck, and the air became filled with the roar of an engine and the multitude of voices of townies. Earl Ford's pickup rounded the corner slowly, making its way past the park, high-power flashlights shining from the hands of the men at the back, scanning the surrounding area carefully. On the opposite side of the street, their beams came across driveways and trash cans, piles of deadened leaves, and the front porches of various shaped houses, some bearing the flicker of candles from behind closed drapes within the windows. The men were armed, some with pistols and others with shotguns, ready for an encounter, grumbling to themselves about catching the son of a bitch who had returned to wreak devastation once again upon this small town of theirs. Suddenly, one of them, the one called Orrin, raised a pointing finger and called out, "There he is!" From the front seat, Earl snatched his Remington 12-gauge pump beside him and immediately bailed out of the truck. The men hopped from the truck's bed and joined him, Orrin continuing to point out the direction which he referred to. Earl slowly marched up toward that direction, pumping the shotgun to ready. Orrin came up beside him, leading him further, then stopped in his tracks and rested his finger in the direction of a series of heavy bushes beside a modest colonial house. "I seen his face!" he half yelled. "Right there, Earl! Right in those bushes!" The other men readied their rifles and shotguns and pistols, all nervous, all shaking, but all as damn well ready as they could ever be in such a desperate moment. Fingers were tense on triggers. There was a long pause of silence before the bushes began to rattle and rustle. Then there was a flash of something pale white which darted across the steady beams of their flashlights and seemed to move toward them. It was then when Earl shouted, "Fire!" The air turned thunderous with the intensity of the pandemonium of shotgun blasts as the men opened fire upon the entire range of the bushes. A deafening firestorm of buckshot grew into a violent crescendo, which echoed throughout the expanse of the town, and various front doors in the surrounding area opened, curious and startled heads popping out to view the commotion. Quickly, the bushes began to disintegrate under the constant blasting, and several languished seconds passed before the last gun finally emptied completely. Smoke eddied above the ruined hedges. Leaves and branches were blasted virtually to dust. The entire row of what was once hedges stood naked and bare before the determined lynch mob. Nothing was left untouched. Toothpicks and sawdust was what their flashlights now beheld, and as the group of men slowly advanced, their flashlights beheld blood. Then the pulverized body of a man. One man cried out in horror, "Shit, Earl! Oh, that's Ted Hollister!" Earl swung around to Orrin. "You told me you saw Myers." Orrin backed away in defensive, yelling, "You told us fire, not me!" Earl dropped his shotgun and hurled a fist at the man, smacking into his left jaw. Jolted backwards against the grass, Orrin rose to his feet and roadblocked Earl into the nearby dust. As both men began to wrestle, others tried despairingly to pull them apart. Chapter 26. The darkness of the attic tended to be a bit haunting for Brady as he finished hammering another window shut. Then again, considering the unnerving circumstances, he had every right to feel scared. He remembered the stories about Michael Myers, and he remembered standing there as the ambulances and paramedics surrounded Laurie Strode's home after the bodies had been found. He was only 7 years old at the time, but tonight, the images wore crystal clear in his mind. Jamie's uncle. It was difficult to believe, yet the whole thing sounded vaguely familiar to him. He was almost certain he heard this about Jamie Lloyd before, but he figured he must not have paid any attention to it. It was like a dream, or more precisely, like déjà vu, this sudden news. And Jamie's uncle was here somewhere within this very town. God only knew how many people had been killed already, somewhere out within the depths of the blackout. He realized it could have been him out there, dead, later to be driven away on a stretcher, with dozens of eyes gazing on after him. But he wasn't out there now, he was in here. He was safe. Then again, for some reason, he didn't feel safe. He felt very vulnerable. Yet he had no reason to be. He was truly safe here. Everyone was truly safe here. They had weapons, and there was Sheriff Meeker, and a deputy there to protect them. And he would protect Rachel and Jamie. Oh, and yes, he would protect Kelly too. Mustn't forget about Kelly. That was another matter. As he moved on to the very last window, there were only 3 windows in the attic, each side by side towards the front of the house. He remembered a few of the momentous times he had shared with Rachel, and he remembered how each one of those times ended with a slight shove from the girl whenever Brady would try to go too far. Kelly wasn't like that. In fact, with Kelly, he didn't even have to make the first move. It was like he was a magnet to her, and she just came to him. Some people called her a slut at one time, with the suicidal boldness to even do it in front of her father. And the ordeal went on until it ended with rock salt up a boy's ass from Meeker's gun. So when it came to notions about sluts, well, let's just say it was all hush-hush. Besides, Kelly was a babe, wasn't she? And there were definitely a few horny guys out there who'd die just to see what Brady saw tonight. But Rachel, well, that was a different story. A final swing of the hammer landed painfully on Brady's thumb. The surge of pain shot up through the throbbing bone, and he let out a sudden yelp. "Jesus!" He heard a sound from behind him. Something fell from somewhere on the attic's far side. Startled, nearly forgetting his aching thumb, Brady searched for his flashlight, groping. He could only see a slight portion of what the moonlight allowed him to see, and the darkness of the room encompassed the space where the flashlight was supposed to be. As soon as he found it, it toppled over and rolled away from his grip. Finally, he retrieved it and flicked it on. He began to scan the room. "Who is it?" Brady called. As far as he could see, the attic was vacant. There was nothing but clutter and sordid memorabilia, old picture frames and dusty paintings, archaic sculptures, prescriptive metal objects, and a box full of what seemed to be dartboards. His flashlight beam then centered on a moose head rocking slowly into a halt. Cautiously, Brady advanced deeper into the room, occasionally glancing back at his shotgun resting propped up against the wall where he finished the windows. The blackness descended behind him, and he continued, and his figure was chased by numerous shadows. Still, he found nothing. Rachel stared blankly out the room's window. She gazed down upon the deserted streets across the way, the only illumination being that of the moonlight. Her eyes had become accustomed to the dark. Her thoughts were on fear, on Brady, on the night. She realized she was growing to hate Halloween. Everything had happened on Halloween, and she didn't know why. Come to think of it, the same rang true for all holidays. She couldn't understand it. She'd ponder upon it in depth later. For now, all she could do was continue to gaze blankly out this window. The possibility of certain doom for both herself and for her foster sister hanging over her head like a curse. Yes, she was afraid. Deathly afraid, but she knew she mustn't let Jamie know she was. Rachel was there to protect her foster sister, and the only way to protect your foster sister from the Nightmare Man was to not have any nightmares yourself, right? Rachel managed to move. She turned slightly to Jamie, whose figure she could see on the bed. She was sitting there motionless, gazing down into the palms of her hands. Rachel then stood and crossed over to her, kneeling down beside her. She spoke in a soft, comforting whisper. "I want you to lie down and try to get some sleep." "I can't sleep," the little girl responded, gazing up at her darkened outline. "The Nightmare Man will come. He'll get me." Lovingly, Rachel laid Jamie backwards on the bed and pulled a folded comforter up and over her arms. She had to be delicate, for Jamie was a delicate little 6-year-old. "Nobody's going to get you while I'm around," Rachel told her. She felt for her sister's hair and gently caressed it. "You promise?" "I promise," she replied. "Now close your eyes." Jamie then said, "Can we go home soon, Rachel?" Rachel thought momentarily and then, "Real soon, kiddo." Another pause. "Real soon. Now, shh." The flashlight flickered in Loomis's hands. He firmly tapped it with his palm, and it resumed to shine upon the front of the shortwave radio's instruments. He was standing, stooping over the sheriff's shoulders as the sheriff sat before the device, adjusting it as was necessary. "How is it powered?" Loomis asked him. "Batteries. I was planning the generator for the house next week. Wish I hadn't waited." After making the proper final adjustments, Meeker drew the radio microphone to his lips. He spoke into it. "This is Squawk 750 Haddonfield, broadcasting on State Police Emergency Frequency. Does anyone hear me?" The radio hissed in reply. Downstairs, Kelly proceeded to make coffee by candlelight, boiling water in a kettle over a gas flame burner in the kitchen. She possessed only one candle. The remainder were in the living room and foyer, giving company to Logan, who'd pulled up an easy chair and sat there with the riot gun in his lap. He seemed to be alert, and whenever Kelly glanced his way, she could see that his eyes rarely wandered far from the front door. As she stood watching him, she remembered the intimacy between herself and Brady that evening. She was stricken with an overwhelming sense of disappointment, but she realized that there was simply nothing she could do at the moment. Besides, her father was there. Oh well, she had enough to worry about. There was no power, and there was a crazy lunatic killer somewhere out there on the streets. Things couldn't really get worse, could they? The wind outside rustled branches against the window glass, momentarily startling her. She took a second to glance around the empty kitchen. Like most children, she used to be afraid of the dark. She experienced a slight chill and told herself that there was nothing to fear but the dark itself. Or did the saying go, "There's nothing to fear but fear itself"? Anyway, it was something like that. But regardless of how the saying went, regardless of how many excuses she could give herself or how she tried to explain it away, she knew she was afraid. Upstairs in the master bedroom, Rachel stood and leaned over her foster sister, lightly kissing her forehead. All was quiet around the two girls, and Jamie was finally dozing under the comforter. Rising, careful not to awaken the sleeping child, she gave her a final glance, after which she silently exited the room, leaving the door ajar. The hall was nearly a pitch black, and the adjustment Rachel's eyes had developed to the lack of light didn't seem to aid her all that much. As she felt for the side wall, she made her way down the hallway's blackness. She cursed herself for not being equipped with the flashlight. Surely the sheriff himself possessed other flashlights hidden somewhere around the house. She could have asked, but at the time she simply had given no thought about it. Barely up ahead, she could view the ghostly outline of the top of the staircase. She reached out and grabbed part of the top portion of the banister. Slowly, she began to descend. Step by careful step, she made her way down to the bottom end and into the glow of the living room candlelight from the fireplace and the television. There was the deputy seated in an easy chair, his body facing the front door. As soon as the young lady moved into his line of sight, he spoke to her and she turned. "Everything okay?" "Jamie's sleeping," she told him quietly. The dark atmosphere had a certain property which made everyone seem to whisper for no clear reason. Still, however, she didn't mind. What she did mind was getting the hell out of this situation. "Jamie's sleeping. When can we go home?" "State police'll come," Logan assured her. "Not long after that, don't worry." "I'm trying," she said. Actually, she had plenty to worry about. For the figure that watched from the shadows behind them, the figure that stood there motionless, that eventually drifted back into the confines of their shared darkness, was waiting, his unearthly mind contemplating patiently behind the pasty white blankness of his mask. Meeker tuned the radio's receiver again for a clear message, and a voice began to fade in. Loomis leaned close to the speaker, listening intently. "I hear someone," he said. From the radio came a low, semi-raspy utterance. Then the voice came in more lucid. "This is Frank Boutte over in Tuckerville. You got some kind of emergency?" "Thank Christ!" Meeker exclaimed. Then into the microphone. "Yes, this is Ben Meeker, the sheriff over in Haddonfield. Our power and phone lines are down, and we've got a killer loose in our streets. Michael Myers." The voice sounded perplexed and angered. "This some kind of Halloween prank?" Meeker's voice was tense. "This isn't a joke. We need the state police, and we need them now." A pause. "I'll give them a call right away. Hang on a sec. I'm going to need name and address." "We're not going anywhere, Mr. Boutte." Loomis exhaled, relieved. At least he was somewhat relieved. Now these people would be safe. The state police would be there soon. Now he knew what he personally had to do. He turned and proceeded to climb the stairs into the kitchen. Inside the kitchen, Kelly was in the process of pouring the coffee into various multicolored mugs, which played with the shadows in the candlelight. Loomis stepped up out of the basement at just about the same time that Rachel entered via the living room. Loomis asked Rachel, "Is your sister all right?" "She's fine," Rachel answered. "Good." Near the downstairs foyer, the doctor approached the deputy and Logan turned. "The sheriff has radioed for help," he said to the deputy. "They'll be here soon." Logan scratched his chin, the other hand remaining clenched to the riot gun. "Hell of a night." Instead of agreeing, Loomis replied, "It's not over yet, deputy." The doctor buttoned his overcoat halfway, turned and headed for the front door, knowing what he had to do, the task that at times he felt he was born to carry out. His hand reached out and grabbed the deadbolt, turning the key and grabbing the knob to open the door. Logan jumped up to stop him. "Hey, where are you going?" "The Carruthers house," the doctor said sternly. "That's where Jamie lives. That's where he'll wait for her. And that's where I'll be waiting for him." "Leave Myers for the state boys," Logan insisted. Loomis shot back a glance. "The state police won't know what to look for, or how to stop it." "Do you know?" Loomis could not answer that. All he knew was to exit out the front door, what he must do. The deputy reluctantly allowed him past, and Loomis pulled the door open, disappearing into the night. The deputy watched as the figure in the overcoat strode quickly down the walkway, and he shook his head. He closed the door and relocked it. In the kitchen, Kelly was searching almost recklessly for a cup of sugar, accidentally knocking a tall glass from the sink and sending it crashing to the floor. "Shit!" she exclaimed. She kicked a few of the shards over to a space on the floor near the plastic wastebasket. As she did so, Rachel, who had been standing along the sidelines watching quietly, stepped close to one of the open cupboards. She reached upwards and closed it, then pulled an object out from the back of the countertop. It was a sugar bowl. "Looking for this?" she said. Kelly turned to her and saw what the girl held, irritated. "Look, I didn't know you and Brady had anything going, okay?" "You knew," she said calmly. "You just didn't care." "He's not married or anything," Kelly defended. "I've got a right to do what's best for me." This was one goddamn bitch, Rachel thought to herself. She was a slut, there were no two ways about it, and the hell with the fact that she happened to be the sheriff's daughter. Rachel proclaimed dramatically, "Future homewreckers of America, unite! Your future president has spoken!" Kelly appeared annoyed. Not only was she a bitchy slut, but she was even a bitchy, conceited slut at that, Rachel thought. Kelly told her, "Wise up to what men want, Rachel, or Brady won't be the last man you lose to another woman." And with that, Rachel reached for a mug of coffee and splashed it across the girl's t-shirt. Startled, Kelly jumped back. The wetness didn't scorch her, and she was grateful to herself for making the coffee set in expectation for the lost sugar bowl. "Have some coffee," Rachel said. She pushed past Kelly and descended into the basement and out of sight. Unbelieving, Kelly stood there for a moment and absorbed the insult as her shirt absorbed the coffee. Angered, she stepped into the nearby laundry room and stripped out of the shirt. Her bra had been flung over to the other side of the couch when her father had pulled up in the driveway before. All her experience still didn't amount to an entirely successful last-minute practice dress. Pausing to wipe the slight wetness from her breast, which glistened in the moonlight streaming down from the nearby window, she threw the shirt into the empty machine and fished for one of her father's flannel button-downs. She found one, sorting through a nearby pile, and slipped it on and buttoned it up. For the life of her, she couldn't understand why someone like Brady would have the slightest interest in a girl as dull as Rachel. She then threw it from her mind, not wanting to deal with such trivialities. "Bitch," she muttered to herself. Jamie was awake, her eyes open to the darkness of the bedroom, and she sat up and gazed around, her eyes accustomed to the lack of light but not being able to locate any sign of her foster sister. Frightened, although not tremendously, at least not yet, she called out, "Rachel?" But there was no answer. "Nobody's going to get you while I'm around," Jamie recalled Rachel saying. "I promise." But Rachel wasn't there, was she? Jamie cast her gaze on the semi-open door. "Rachel will be back," she told herself, but somehow there was a lingering doubt. Rachel stepped over behind Meeker, and the sheriff acknowledged her presence with a weary smile. Then something else began to come in from the radio. As Rachel leaned over, Meeker lost whatever smile he had, his face turning hard and rigid. He listened to the radio crosstalk among the stridency of squelch and interference. "Corner Elm and Gateway," a voice spoke within the speaker of the black box. "Shot Ted Hollister by mistake. Must have been taking a piss," or a new voice and deeper. "Is he dead?" The other voice said, "Well, he sure ain't living." "Oh, Christ," the sheriff muttered. He snatched up the microphone and spoke into it. "Is Earl Ford out there? This is Sheriff Meeker." There was now only static. "Answer me, damn it!" More static. Meeker angrily rose to his feet. Stooping, he grabbed his shotgun. "Sheriff?" Rachel asked. "What's going on out there?" "Just wait here by the radio," Meeker instructed. "The state boys are going to send word once they're en route. When that word comes, tell Deputy Logan, you understand?" Rachel nodded. Meeker headed for the stairs, kicking his foot into a metal object as he went, nearly tripping, semi-exhausted. Alone, Rachel was in charge of the radio. She was scared, not because she was by herself in a dark basement, but, oddly enough, because of the pressure of responsibility. What the hell did she know about talking into a police radio? Hell, she didn't even know what breaker meant. She thought she knew what 10-4 meant, though. God, what if she said the wrong thing? What could she do? But in the midst of her panic, she realized that all she had to do was talk plain English. The god of the shortwave radios could punish her later, or something like that. She plunked down on the wooden chair in front of the small shortwave unit and stared at the instruments. The darkness surrounded her with the exception of the bright beam of the flashlight, which rested on the bench beside the black static-filled box. She decided she would only touch it if someone called for her, or if she had to call for someone, which wouldn't be necessary, of course. She thought of Jamie upstairs. That girl didn't deserve this terror. What in God's name would allow something like this to happen to such a sweet little girl as she? It just didn't seem fair. But then again, the world didn't seem fair. Nothing seemed fair anymore. But there she sat, waiting impatiently for the state police to come and rid the night of the darkness. Out in the foyer, Sheriff Meeker turned the key, which opened the deadbolt to the front door. Logan jumped to his feet from the easy chair and went to him. Before the sheriff stepped aside, he checked his shotgun momentarily. Then to the deputy he said, "I'll be at Elm and Gateway. Doubt I'll be back before the troopers get here, but maybe you ought to stay until they do." Meeker then replied, "I've got a town full of beer bellies running around the dark with shotguns. Who's next? Somebody's wife? Somebody's kid? I can't sit by for that. Not and carry a badge." As Meeker proceeded to exit, Logan stopped him. "Watch yourself out there, Ben. Those beer bellies aren't the only bad news on the streets." "Just keep this door locked," the sheriff said, "and your eyes open." Logan closed the front door once again and threw the lock in place, leaving the key in the mechanism. Sighing, he turned and proceeded back to the easy chair, with his riot gun in hand. In the kitchen, Kelly readied the coffee for serving and set a steaming mug on a metal tray. Taking the tray with her, she walked towards the kitchen exit in the direction of the living room. The candle at the sink flickered with the soft breeze of her movements. On her way out, she banged her foot in the darkness of the space beside her, stubbing a bare toe against the leg of the kitchen table. Shit! She could feel the vibrations of the swirling of the coffee within the mug, but she could not detect whether or not it spilled. She despised the darkness and cursed it, setting the tray down and massaging her throbbing toe. Why the hell did there have to be a goddamn power outage this night for anyway? She thought. If there was a god out there, he was probably getting his kicks right now, watching and laughing as Kelly stood there blindly aiding her naked, aching toe. This was great. Just great. Moderately flustered, she grabbed the tray from the table. With each new step, however, despite the pain, her frustrations began to dwindle. This coffee was for the deputy, and she wanted to be nice to him. God knew everyone was tired, and at least somewhat spooked from this entire affair, and Logan was no exception. Besides, he was responsible for protecting them now. He was in charge. And maybe, just maybe, she could get somewhere with him later. Remember, Daddy wasn't there no more. Shadows played with her figure, and a shapely black ghost fluttered and danced across the furniture and walls, moving as she did through the living room, over the carpet, and past the fireplace. The luminosity of candlelight accompanied her as she went, entering the foyer with tray in hand and setting it down on an antique lowboy. Kelly watched as Logan remained seated in the easy chair, head and back turned towards her, awaiting quietly for the slightest sounds of calamity. Kelly spoke out, breaking the silence. "Thought you might like some coffee," she said, and then, "Pretty boring out here." Logan said nothing, remaining alert, ignoring her presence. She continued, "I wish they'd fix the power. So dark. I just stubbed my goddamn toe on the kitchen table. And at least we could have some, MTV while we're sitting here waiting for the cavalry." Logan refused to reply. "Your coffee's gonna get cold." Silence. In the shadows beside Kelly and on top of the antique lowboy was an unlit candle and a book of matches, which bore the words Sookie's Den embossed on the front. She grabbed the matchbook and struck a match, illuminating the terror, glazed pupils of Logan's mangled face, his body distortedly propped up against the foot of the lowboy in a bloody heap. Kelly's hands went to her mouth, and she would have let out a horrified scream if it weren't for the sensation of her heart crawling up her windpipe to plop out of her widened mouth and into the stiffness of her palm. In a mixture of utter revulsion and shock, she stepped backwards as the figure of the one in the mask rose from the deputy's easy chair in full proportion, towering before her. Before she had time to think, the shape grabbed her. The immediate surge of agony swelled up from her abdomen, and it took but a split second's time before she realized she was impaled, the riot gun barrel already through her torso, and the wood of the foyer closet behind her. And this terror was the last sensation she felt before she knew no more. There was no sound, no struggle. The shape released her and stepped back, gazing in morbid admiration as the body of the teenage girl hung there before him, the wetness of her blood seeping from the obstruction, protruding from her waist. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been chapters 25 and 26 of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers Ultimate Edition by Nicholas Grabowsky. Gotta say, really enjoyed these chapters tonight. It was a lot of, not really filler, but really setting the tone for what's about to happen in the story. The whole lynch mob thing, taking out an innocent man, really fucked up, but we all kind of saw that coming. But yeah, most of chapter 26 just kind of, took us from person to person in this house as they're all sitting there, staking out that house, staying there until the state police get there to help them. And, every time the scene switched, and even the little spot where Michael was watching from the side, it just really set that suspense and everything up really well. As somebody has said in the comment section a couple of times, and Dr. Wolfula has said on his channel about the movie, this is the most terrifying Halloween film, in a lot of people's opinion. I might agree with that. I'm going to have to rewatch the whole series again, but as far as this book goes, Grabowsky is doing an amazing job of really putting you there and making you feel that suspense and that terror. Because as much as not a lot happened in the chapters tonight, as far as action goes, there was a lot of suspense in the air. And even when the girls are bickering and everything, underneath all that, they're in this house knowing that Michael Myers is out there and may show up at any time. So even in those moments where they're kind of escaping the reality of their situation, that reality is still very much there, hanging in the air. So it was nice that we ended tonight's upload with Kelly's kill. As usual, we didn't get Logan's. I was hoping for a few differences in the book from the movie, but that's okay. The surprise and shock of Kelly seeing his dead body while she's sitting there thinking about banging him or whatever it was really works, and it worked really well in the book too. So yeah, I thought the kill on Kelly was very well written. Damn, just got that gun just right through her, man. And I can just picture Michael standing there, head cocked, admiring at his handiwork. So yeah, it looks like it's really about to kick in now, guys. I'll be back very soon, and I hope you'll join me for the next installment of Halloween 4 by Nicholas Grabowsky. Really looking forward to this one, guys. See you soon. Till then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening. Pleasant dreams! And I'll see you real soon.